It's an absolute privilege to bring you this week's story. It's Strengths Month and we have a tale of a young lady who was completely connected to her own strengths. So tenacious, so courageous, peace-loving, and she made a massive contribution to the war effort without taking a life. We're going to tell you the story of Noor Inayat Khan, a spy codenamed Madeleine who was dropped into occupied Europe in 1943. Born in 1914 in Russia to an American mum and an Indian father from royal descent, Noor Inayat Khan had an amazing upbringing. She was peace-loving and came from a peace-loving family. Herself, she was generous, honest, and loved helping others. As a young child, she moved to Paris and carried on living this idyllic upbringing, but soon the storm clouds of war could be seen. Hitler's troops in 1939 swept into Europe and it became clear to Noor and her family that they needed to get out. Now, Noor was peace-loving, so the whole thought of war went against the grain for her, but she also knew that she had to do her duty and she had to play her part in returning peace and freedom to the world. And it's because of that real conviction and that real connection to one of her strengths, which is a sense of duty, that she made her way to Great Britain and joined the WAFs, the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. It was here that Noor absolutely excelled as an operator. She learned Morse code, she was out of her comfort zone learning all these new skills, but she excelled at sending and receiving messages, and that is why she was recognised for a very secret and special organisation. The Special Operations Executive, or SOE, were in charge of all the agents that Britain used. These were the people who were dropped into occupied Europe to disrupt, set Europe ablaze from within, and help the French resistance do their work and try and regain some freedom. When they interviewed Noor, they said to her, "Look, we can see that you speak French fluently. You know Paris like the back of your hand. You're an incredible radio operator who knows Morse code. We would love you to be a spy." How do you think Noor reacted to that? I mean, think how daunting that would be. Like, you're going to be dropped into occupied territory. Let's not forget that Europe was a fortress. German soldiers were everywhere, and she would have been operating from Paris. She would have been living with the enemy, and she didn't give the opportunity a second thought. She said yes straight away, and so began the career of secret agent Madeleine. The challenge that she faced during those dark days was huge. Now, as a radio operator, it was one of the most dangerous roles an agent could fulfill because the equipment she used was so cumbersome. It was hard to hide, hard to move, and easy to detect from the German army. She was in Paris, she would have been living in amongst the enemy, full of challenges, on her own. But regardless of all that, Noor got prepared, continued her training, learned how to use a gun, learned how to pick locks, and in 1943 was flown out at night and dropped in occupied Europe. She landed in occupied France with her pistol, her fake papers, and her equipment for sending and receiving messages, and made her way to Paris to meet a contact. But little did she know that while she was making her way there, the whole spy network in Paris had been rumbled and had been arrested by the Gestapo. She arrived to a scene of devastation. There was no one there was no support network there, and Noor was on her own. Now, she was given the option by the SOE to immediately come home. They sort of said to her, "We know there's very little you can do, come back." But she made the decision to stay. She connected to her strengths. She was so tenacious, so brave, and she knew she had a part to play in returning freedom to the world. For 4 months, she was the only radio operator in Paris. Now, let's just put into perspective the job she was doing. Britain needed information, they needed intelligence, they needed to know what the Germans were doing, were thinking, were saying. They needed people on the ground to work with the French resistance. And Noor was the only person doing that job. She spoke fluent French, she had a fake identity, and she was weaving her way into the French society. Now, Can you imagine how scary, terrifying, you'd be on the edge of your seat the whole time, your nerves would be jangling the whole time, but she was able to hold that down and do her job. There were times where she was trying to fit a radio aerial to the side of the house so she could send and receive these messages, only to be questioned by a German soldier. She was able to convince him that because of her love of music, she wanted to hear the latest songs, and he then helped her fit the aerial. She was incredibly tenacious, and she did an incredibly important job. Now this intensity, this day-to-day loneliness carried on for 4 months, when eventually her identity was given away and she was arrested by the Gestapo. It was such a tragedy for a woman who had done so much for this cause, but regardless of all the interrogation and torture, she would not speak. She did not give a single piece of information away. A few weeks into her captivity, she was even able to escape and then recaptured, and the Germans carried on interrogating her, trying to find out information from her. Who were the SOE? Who sent her there? Who's she communicating with? But she did not give them a single piece of information. There's even evidence of German letters commending her, saying, wow, like, this woman cannot be broken. And they realized that there was nothing left to do but to send Noor to Dachau concentration camp. It was there, after one last-ditch attempt to get information out of Noor, that she had to face the firing squad, and she was executed. The last words that she was heard saying was simply liberty, freedom. Now what an incredible lady. Her achievements are just staggering. The empathy in me just boils over, just thinking, oh my God, what would that have felt like? How did she manage to do it? How did she keep going? How did she remain strong during those dark days of interrogation? And I think she was able to do that because she was truly in touch with who she was, her strengths. She loved freedom, and she knew that her vision, her goal was to contribute to returning freedom to the world. She was so tenacious, so quick thinking, such a good radio operator that she was tailor-made for the role, and she was completely in touch with who she was, uniquely who she was. And I find that so inspiring. Like, surely if we're all in touch with our own strengths and our own abilities and achieve just a snippet of what Noor did, then the world would truly be a better place. And that's why we had to share her story in Strengths Month. She made a huge contribution to the war effort without taking a single life, and because of her achievements was awarded the George Cross, one of only 3 women to do so throughout the entire war. Noor, thank you.